Morning, happy Monday. Jackie Broman here from TBA Law. Monday morning Facebook Live, short piece of legal information. I'm at the moment in a series of giving some information about different entities that you can run your business in. After I do these Facebook Lives, I save the videos onto our Facebook page, so you can go back and have a look through all the videos there. I've done a whole lot of videos on estate planning and deceased estate administration because that's my specialty, but we also do a whole lot of property work at TBA Law, so I've done a series on buying and selling property as well as leasing. I also did a short 4-part series on regulations around living in the community and with your neighbours, like drainage, trees and fences. And now I'm in a 5-part series of how or what entities best to do business in. And so the last 2 episodes I did was on sole trader, and then last week was partnership. And so this week I'm doing companies, and next week will be trusts, and then that will finish that short series. So just like I've said in the last 2 episodes, the structure that you use for your business really comes down to what stage you're at in business and what your goals are with your business. So with a sole trader, it's really good for someone who might be a tradie or might be starting out and growing their business. They probably don't want to grow the business much more than maybe $150,000 in revenue as a sole trader because of the tax situation and because of asset protection. And a partnership in some ways is similar too, because the partners are exposed to liabilities of the business, and also you can't reduce tax very far with a partnership because you're paying tax at marginal rates of an individual. Whereas a company is the sort of structure that you look at once your revenue sort of got over $150,000 for a sole trader, or maybe over about $300,000 for a partnership. And that's not a solid rule. You'd really want to, again, weigh up a number of factors as to what is best for you. But a company pays tax at a fixed rate. As the owner, you can then be an employee of the company, and then your wage is a tax deduction of the company. And there's a number of other benefits as well. So asset protection is a big one. With a company, it is a separate legal entity, or it has its own persona, legal persona, so to speak. So a company can be sued in its own right, and the liabilities of the company are quite often isolated or stuck within the company, so to speak. Unless you've given directors' guarantees over debt, or you've done something wrong as a director, such as trading insolvent, you're not going to be personally liable for the debts of your company. So if your company goes insolvent, it doesn't mean that you also go bankrupt. And it also doesn't mean that if the company can't pay its debts, that your house is at risk. So that is one of the biggest benefits of having a company. It's a separate legal entity, and so you can protect your own personal assets. The company can own its own assets as well. And the company also can continue on and have different directors and different owners over time, whereas a sole trader or a partnership is much more difficult to have any flexibility around ownership or around succession. So succession is the other big pro around a company. So you can sell shares or bring in other people and give them shares in the company. You can have various directors over time. The original person who started the company doesn't have to continue in the company. The company also continues after the death of the owner, which is not the case with a sole trader or a partnership. So if you're growing your business as an asset, that you want it to be valuable, particularly because you're putting so much effort into your business. You want it to be worth something to your family if something happens to you. Then you do need to look at a structure that's a bit more sophisticated than a sole trader or a partnership. And a company is about the simplest structure, which is the next step up from those first two that we've considered. The other thing about setup and running costs. So there's not much more setting up and running costs to a company than there is to a partnership if you set the partnership up in the first place properly. Obviously, if you go back and have a listen to the sole trading video, that's the easiest and cheapest to set up. You just need to get an ABN in your own name and off you go. A business name potentially if you're not trading in your own name, but that's pretty much it. With a company, you would register the company with ASIC. The company would have its own tax file number and ABN. You'd set up a bank account, and that's pretty much it. If you had other people in the company with you, you'd have a shareholder agreement like you would have a partnership agreement. Other than that, that's pretty much it. You're ready to go. Every year, you've then got a minimal fee that you paid at ASIC to keep the registration. It's about $160. And each year as well, you've got a separate tax return for your company. But you've got a separate tax return as a partnership as well anyway. So it's a similar amount of paperwork and regulation in some respects. So asset protection's a big pro. The ability to have and vary control over time and have value in the succession of the business is really a big pro. Setup and running costs are not significant. It allows much more flexibility than a sole trader or a partnership in terms of who's in the company at any one time. And obviously, from a tax perspective, company pays a lower rate of tax than individuals, so you can have a whole lot more expenses and things in the company to keep the tax low and pay yourself a wage. So those are some of the things, pros particularly, for a company. Some of the cons for a company. And again, all this depends on what size of business you have. And what sort of assets you're buying in the company. There's no CGT discount generally in a company, so if you're buying assets that would have capital gains, a company's probably not what you would look at. You'd look more at a trust for that situation. You also have to, I suppose, be aware that some of the major issues with a company is if the interests of the shareholders are not properly regulated. So I said before you'd want a shareholder agreement. Majority of companies out there that are family owned or have multiple directors don't have shareholder agreements, and that's where things really go wrong. But that is not necessarily a con because you can address it. If you address it with a shareholder agreement early on in the piece, and a dispute arises, at least you've got a document and a whole structure how to regulate and work out how to resolve that dispute. So there you go. Pros and cons of companies for your small business. I'm obviously a little bit biased towards a company. I think that this is really the way to go, potentially with a trust underneath it as well. But from asset protection and tax and succession, I just think that it ticks all those boxes. So there you are, the third in the series of looking at pros and cons of various structures. Like I said, next week, 10 o'clock on Monday, I'll be doing a short video on pros and cons of trusts and doing business in a trust. And then that'll finish that short series. So every Monday morning, 10 o'clock, I'm live here in Facebook. I hope you have a great week. I hope this video was useful. If it was, or if it was interesting for someone else you think, tag their name in it, and likewise, all the videos are then saved onto the page. I'll see you next week.